Hey YouTube, Joyboy here. So today I want to talk about the Vinsmoke, Ichiji, and Sanji, their relationships, everything that happened in the last chapter. And the potential, whether small or large, that Sanji still ends up fighting his family, despite what we learned from this chapter. But before we get into this, I just want to remind everyone just how unpredictable Oda actually is. It's kind of like the whole Pudding situation. Pudding was initially revealed as good, and everyone was just like, well, now confirmed she's a good character. And then afterwards, she was shown to be evil, and everyone's like, okay, now it's confirmed she's an evil character. Now, sometimes things are straightforward, and other times they're not, and differentiating between the two can be incredibly difficult. And so how exactly then do you predict the unpredictable? If Oda wants to hide something, he will. He has no problems turning the story completely on its head on a regular basis, and Whole Cake Island has done this repeatedly. And so if you follow my channel for any amount of time, you know the one way that leads to any amount of success whatsoever is to attempt to find and comprehend the clues Oda has intentionally left within the pages. I see a lot of people out there who are so quick to label the whole situation with the Vinsmoke as I'm completely wrong, and it just doesn't work that way. Oda intentionally deceives us from the truth so often that I'm surprised people forget, specifically when it comes to the things Oda wants to hide. I'm certain there will be a ton of people in the comment section I've already seen in my last video and in this video as well, which are going to say, accept it, Joyboy. The Vinsmoke are now allies, they will forever be allies. And I just want you guys to keep in mind that we never really know. You just have to base whatever it is you think on evidence and some sort of actual reasoning. If you always blindly believe whatever it is Oda is intending for you to believe, you will always predict plot twists incorrectly. Always. So there may be times where my reasoning leads me to believe in a plot twist that is never going to happen, and therefore it was as blatantly straightforward as just reading the chapter at face value. But at the same time, this allows me the potential to be able to predict that which Oda intended to be unpredictable. It all comes down to a mastery of being able to find and interpret the clues, which is always a work in progress. But this leads me to the thought that the Vinsmoke are not as we are being led after this chapter. There's one thing that I think a lot of people are going to overlook with this chapter, which I find to be very important, which is that, of course, Sanji never got along with his family, including his father or his brothers. But which of these two entities, father or brothers, was far more antagonistic to Sanji? Now, of course, as a father, your responsibilities are a bit greater than that of your brothers, but the one who really held true hatred and ability to harm Sanji was the brothers and not Judge. Aside from their brief clash at the beginning of Whole Cake Island, if we look at all the flashbacks and all the information, Judge never really laid a hand on Sanji. He was disappointed in Sanji, he mistreated Sanji from the perspective that he never helped him, but the people that really made Sanji's life hell wasn't his father, it was his brothers. And this is even held true in the Whole Cake Island arc, because the main antagonistic force within the Vinsmoke during Whole Cake Island itself was again the brothers and not Judge. The point that I really want to make here is that resolution is not only important between Judge and Sanji, resolution should also be important between Sanji and his brothers. And why this is curious is in this last chapter, when we get all of this resolution between the Vinsmokes and Sanji, the only one who really speaks is Judge. A lot of people are reading this chapter as the Vinsmoke have done a 180, but the only one who's really done a 180 for sure is Judge. The brothers did not at one point in time ever say that they had any intention or good feelings for Sanji or really want to help him. At this point, we do not know how the brothers actually feel about what went down in this chapter, because the only lines that we get of any personality whatsoever from them is Ichiji essentially telling Neji to leave Revujo alone. If she's going to be weak, then that's her fault. And Ichiji specifically refers to all of this as nothing more than a mission. So because they didn't actually say anything in support of the plan, in this last chapter, there is still hope for a Vinsmoke and Sanji battle, specifically Sanji versus his brothers, but probably not his father. And so because of the way that this is set up, there's only really one possibility for how this conflict would come about, and that's if specifically the brothers act against Judge Vinsmoke's will. They betray him. And there is quite a bit of evidence which substantiates this possibility. And so we'll start here, right? So, you know, some people might say, well, certainly they didn't say anything in this chapter in support of the plan, but they're still fighting alongside Judge Vinsmoke in order to protect the Straw Hats. And my argument for this is something based on what Revujo said, which Revujo called herself an accomplice, that she has been programmed in such a way that she cannot disobey Judge Vinsmoke's direct commands. So it's quite possible that the brothers at this point in time have absolutely no say or choice. And I think we have specific evidence which suggests that the brothers have been manipulated in the same way as Revujo, because Niji attempted to kick Sanji after he defended Cosette in the table. Judge Vinsmoke was there, and who stopped Niji? Judge. He says, "Stand down, Niji." But you know, that didn't stop him from actually wanting to attack Sanji, because what happens after this is incredibly interesting. When neither Sanji nor Judge were present, the brothers attacked Cosette and injured her badly. So really, they provoked Sanji, and conveniently Yanji happened to be there in order to fuel this fire. Yanji says all signs point to Niji. They were so clearly baiting Sanji. And lo and behold, as Yanji is talking to Sanji and explaining Germa to him, all of the brothers then appear around Sanji to gang up on him. Know your place, Sanji, and conveniently they happen to do this when Judge wasn't looking. This clearly differentiates the motivation of Judge and the motivation of Sanji's brothers, and it also implies that they don't really care what it is that he has to say. And so guys, I could waste a lot of time trying to explain or understand or rationalize how Judge's control over the children and his own subordinates actually works, but I think really what's most important to note is that if Judge Vinsmoke is there, he can control his subordinates, but when Judge Vinsmoke is not there or knocked out, he loses this ability. It is absolutely no coincidence that the brothers attacked Sanji when Judge Vinsmoke was absent. So if Judge Vinsmoke wasn't there, if they got separated, potentially, or if Judge Vinsmoke was knocked out, defeated, then the brothers could do whatever it is that they want to do. And so the question after this point in time, if we assume that it's possible Judge Vinsmoke gets knocked out and the brothers are free to act on their own desires, what is it that they actually desire? And so based on what I can see from previous chapters in One Piece, I think that they would want to attack Sanji, given the opportunity. And so the first thing that needs to be said is that Judge Vinsmoke is not like his children, specifically the brothers, which is that the brothers are specifically stated to be monsters, to not possess real emotions and feelings, and Judge Vinsmoke is specifically stated to be the opposite. Judge viewed Sanji as a huge disappointment and a great stain on his life, but you'll know that Judge never actually had the balls really to kill Sanji. And when Sanji attempts to escape, Judge is completely fine with it because he assumes that Sanji will die, not being able to protect himself. He says this, "It's music to my ears actually that you're leaving. No matter how much I wanted it, my humanity just wouldn't allow it. Even as useless as you are, I couldn't bring myself to dispose of you with my own hands." This contrasts with what the brothers said, so you didn't really kick the bucket? For father to go through that entire charade? Well, duh, it's because he wished the lie were true. Then maybe we can bring father true happiness by making sure you really do die. Judge Vinsmoke still has humanity. The children do not, as Revujo says specifically. Sorry about that, my brother lacks even the barest shred of humanity. And even as Judge Vinsmoke says, let them be monsters. Or even as Judge said recently in the Tea Party, what the hell is wrong with you guys? The point, as very clearly illustrated, is that the brothers are far, far worse, far more of monsters than Judge Vinsmoke. And so in this last chapter, it appears as though Judge was very heavily moved by the fact that Sanji, despite how his family treats him, stuck around to save their lives. But is this same thing true for the brothers? This is a whole lot more ambiguous. And guys, I would argue very, very strongly that the Vinsmoke brothers do not care whether they are saved. There are two things that they value, as is revealed in the story. They value power and strength. They hate those that are weak or useless, and they value royalty. They look down on those who are not royals. There's a very sharp contrast between how the brothers and how Judge were showcased during the events of the Tea Party, where essentially they were held hostage and they assumed that they had lost and they were about to die. Oda made it a point to show us just how scared and upset Judge was. Those tears which we made memes over, right? This is showcasing the difference between Judge and the brothers. He saw his life flash before his eyes, and through this moment, Sanji was his savior. But this is not the same feelings and emotions that we get from the brothers. The brothers, they didn't care. No one's gonna save us now. Time for them to pump us full of candy-sized holes. Well, it looks like we fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Ha ha ha. Given their lack of concern at their own imminent deaths, why would they be moved by being saved by Sanji? And even if they were moved, would it be to the same extent as Judge? Probably not. And guys, this leads to a huge point, which is that to the children, strength matters. Weakness is not tolerated. And we can even see an example of this during the Tea Party when Judge starts crying and Ichiji remarks that his actions are pathetic. Judge in this instance is being weak, and Ichiji tells us straight up that he's not okay with it. And to them, showing any empathy whatsoever is pathetic and weak. There's an innumerable number of panels which support this thought. Stemming from, at first, Revujo was afraid to defend Sanji, even though that's actually what she wanted to do, because she didn't want to become the brothers' next target. By Revujo showing empathy towards Sanji would have made her a target of the brothers' rage. We are going to talk about this panel a lot very shortly, but I want you to keep it in mind. Ichiji said in this very last chapter, the weak ones are the ones at fault. This line was used to justify Ichiji telling Niji to not worry about Revujo. If Revujo dies, that's on her. The weak have no one but themselves to blame. People really are going to underestimate this line, but it is vastly important to understanding Ichiji's motives, which is, as a child, who does Ichiji blame for Sanji's weakness? He blames Sanji himself, and just as he does not want Niji to help Revujo, he also didn't want anyone to help Sanji. Sanji can either stand on his two legs or die in the pursuit. Ichiji does not value saving the weak. And the implication that Revujo gives us in the past is that not only does Ichiji not value saving the weak, but he despises those who would attempt to save the weak. Revujo's own understanding of her brothers prevented her from helping Sanji. So now let's just spam evidence which adds to this. Back after they learned that Sanji supposedly died, Niji says, "Did he seriously go and die on us?" And Ichiji says, "This is me caring. Besides, he was completely useless anyway." Ichiji really doesn't care if the weak, which he perceives as being useless, die. The same is even true of his own family and organization. If they're too weak to survive, then they deserve to die. After the brothers attack Cosette, "You brought this on yourself, Sanji. That's what happens when you stick up for the peasants." Sanji is the kind of guy who always sticks up for the weak, who always tries to help others. As Revujo puts it, "You are kinder than anyone." And Ichiji says this, "I've never understood how that brain of yours worked ever since we were brats." Niji also says this, "You've gotten way too comfortable rubbing elbows with the low-life commoners. If you insist on calling yourself my brother, I won't stand for such demeaning and despicable acts." Even the act of standing up for a commoner enrages the brothers. As royals, they see it as demeaning and despicable. And guys, this is ever so relevant to the current events in the chapters, because the Vinsmoke were showcased to be weak, and Sanji saved them. Ichiji has said straight up that he doesn't understand what goes through Sanji's minds to make him or allow him to reach such decisions. And he personally has said straight up, even in this last chapter, that the weak deserve to die, which includes his own family and even himself. And as for rubbing shoulders with commoners, that is currently what Judge Vinsmoke has ordered the Vinsmoke to do. And Judge Vinsmoke is also trying to selflessly help the Straw Hats and their allies, who at this point in time seem weak compared to the Big Mom Pirates. Ichiji has stated that the weak need to fight for themselves, so the Vinsmoke are currently fighting for the weak. Ichiji, which is something Ichiji does not understand. This whole situation is counter to what Ichiji believes in. Judge's actions, as of the last few chapters, is 100% against the setup for Ichiji's character, as well as, to a lesser extent, the other brothers. groveling for mercy, being okay with getting saved, bowing down to the wishes of a commoner, a weakling, and then actually going out of your way to protect the weak. Fam, I'm convinced that even if Judge Vinsmoke views Sanji as a savior and his pride won't allow him to not help out Sanji given what Sanji did for him, that Ichiji and the brothers will not have these same feelings. There may even be a hint towards this in the last chapter, where Judge specifically says we of the German 66 will provide you with our protection. And we can see these 3 exclamation points, and we can assume that these are not in relation to Judge Vinsmoke. We can see over in the top right hand corner there's a question mark exclamation point which revolves around Caesar. But I think the 3 exclamation points is actually, you can see Ichiji in this panel. I think this is literally Ichiji being mad at what he's about to be forced to do. And it's also worth noting that once Judge says we of the German 66 will provide you with our protection, that's an order. An order that probably Ichiji and the other brothers cannot disobey. And so going back to the end of this chapter where Ichiji sort of describes this as a mission, I think his mission is to protect the Straw Hats and allies. But that doesn't mean he's okay with it. There's a reason why Ichiji only had 1 line in this entire chapter. The weak have no one to blame but themselves. I really don't know how you can take this any other way than for it to suggest that he is very much unhappy with being forced to protect the weak. And with this lingering resentment, which I believe is very clearly demonstrated based on all of the evidence within the chapters, then you have to know that at some point in time, this must be resolved. Sanji's relationship with Judge is just one part. It's also important to resolve the relationship with his brothers, which is right now not possible. So there's a couple things that need to happen. Obviously, Judge seems to have control over his subordinates and his children. So in order to act as Ichiji wants to, Judge must be taken out of the picture in some way. And I think the second thing that needs to happen is they must first complete their mission. Guys, a lot of people don't want to believe this, but honestly, this sequence of events, specifically Ichiji's line at the end of this chapter, highly goes against the notion that the Vinsmoke as a group have completely done a 180. And if you assume that this conflict must be resolved, and it seems it's necessary to resolve it within Whole Cake Island, that means that Ichiji and his brothers will actually fight Sanji and, Straw Hats and allies. And if they can only fight after, for sure, Judge Vinsmoke is not able to intervene, and as well they complete their mission, this perfectly leads into my prediction that I made a long time ago and been arguing for some time for the end of this arc, which is that Big Mom would go on a rage, and she would get taken care of, and you're left with the Vinsmoke essentially going out for revenge. The absolute most critical piece for this puzzle, though, is the defeat of Judge Vinsmoke, or at the very least, it seems that way. But a very important aspect of this is that Judge Vinsmoke has done a 180. So now we have reason to believe that Judge Vinsmoke can actually fix the brothers. As Revujo says, they lack humanity, they're monsters, they are complete scum that deserve to die. But if they do something against Judge Vinsmoke's wishes, after essentially attacking the person that saved them, maybe even they attack Judge Vinsmoke himself, that would give Judge Vinsmoke cause to make them better people using science. Judge Vinsmoke's turn just made it very possible for the entire Vinsmoke organization to change for the better, which is what the Straw Hats do at the conclusion of every single arc. Germa is a country, and just like every other country that these Straw Hats have ever visited, they leave that country making it a better place. Think about that one for a bit. But anyway, guys, that's all I really wanted to talk about today. I expect to get hate from people who see short-sightedly. There's a lot of people out there that will believe whatever it is that is obvious, and of course they'll be right for the very obvious things, and they can't necessarily be wrong because whatever it is that they believe, the vast majority also believes, so it's like, well, everyone was wrong, so there's really no standing out there. But I believe that there's a substantial amount of evidence to suggest that what we got in the last chapter about the Vinsmoke was highly misleading. And if I'm gonna stand alone here, well, then so be it. I'll either end up being the only person who's right or the only person who is wrong. But I really do believe my perspective is more than justified. But anyway, let me know if you agree or if you don't. If there's evidence that contradicts me or additional evidence which supports me. Let me know what you think. Like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video, subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.